Nowadays, in marriage and family, adultery is taboo. Whether male or female, both can be affected by the sad reality of society. One person goes to work outside to earn money to take care of the family. The other person is so bored that he has an affair. More condemnable is adultery with a family member, also known as incest. This also causes the breakdown of many marriages. Today's case is related to this sensitive issue. A girl was found dead in her bedroom, but what is worth mentioning is that next to her was the victim's father-in-law. Before the incident could reach the police, the community was already talking about it. This is understandable, because for a long time, the victim's family has always been respected by everyone. No one dares to believe that such immoral things would happen. On August 7, 1990, the police in Guangdong County, Sichuan, China received a report from the public about the death of a girl from an unknown cause. It was known that the victim had never had a history of serious illness and had been completely healthy in recent days. When the incident was discovered, there were only 2 people in the house: the victim and her father-in-law. They were caught lying on the same bed, and the father-in-law could not deny having an affair with his daughter-in-law. However, he vehemently denied being the culprit of the death. But with only 2 people in the house, could believe he was innocent? First to discover the girl was the victim's husband and a middle-aged man who was the family's neighbor. It was early morning, around 6 a.m. They entered the house and caught a man and a woman lying on the bed. At first, the victim's husband angrily shook his wife awake, but after a while, he discovered something strange. Heart had stopped beating. The neighbor saw this and immediately ran to report to the police. The scene was the victim's father-in-law's private bedroom. The man was both frightened and ashamed at the revelation. This was a neatly decorated room, but the gray bed sheet was wrinkled. Pillow and blanket were in disarray. Looking around the room, the police found a used condom on the table near the bed, along with some of the victim's messy clothes on the floor. In addition, personal belongings and items in the room were all in normal condition, with no signs of a fight or violence. The window had been closed, and the curtains were drawn to block out the light from outside, which was very convenient for concealing the wrongdoings of the father-in-law and daughter-in-law. The victim's body was lying on the bed in a supine position, eyes closed, but the expression on her face showed pain and discomfort. Eyebrows and forehead were furrowed. The victim's husband said that when he discovered her, she was naked, so he went back to their room to get a dress to put on for her. The police also easily noticed traces on the victim's body that showed that she had had sex before she died. Her mouth was slightly swollen. Her lips and tongue were also swollen. Red and purple marks from sucking or biting appeared on sensitive areas of the body, such as the neck, thighs, and chest. The autopsy results showed that the victim's vaginal area was red and swollen, possibly due to friction and vigorous activity. Increased vaginal secretions are a natural reaction of the body during and after sex. Thus, before she died, she had sex with a man who was none other than her father-in-law. In addition, a strange phenomenon was discovered, with red rashes on her skin, especially in the neck, chest, and around the vaginal area. The initial cause of death was determined to be suffocation or overstimulation. Upon further examination, blood analysis revealed high levels of histamine, a sign of a severe allergic reaction. The rash skin fragments found showed signs of an allergy to latex. Analysis of the victim's internal organs showed signs of anaphylactic shock, including pulmonary and laryngeal edema. Latex is natural rubber, so how did the victim come into contact with this substance in the room? Remembering the condom fragment, the police examined it and found that it was a latex condom. If the victim had a history of latex allergy, then when exposed to this condom, she would definitely have a severe reaction. The autopsy revealed that the victim had suffered anaphylactic shock. Anaphylactic shock is a severe and potentially life-threatening allergic reaction that occurs when the body overreacts to an allergen. When allergic to a substance in condoms, such as latex, the body can produce an extreme immune response. Therefore, the cause of death of the victim was anaphylactic shock, which occurred about 5 to 6 hours before being discovered. To make sure that the victim's father-in-law was the one who had sex with her before her death, the police also conducted a DNA test on the bed sheets, clothes, and traces of sexual intercourse left on the victim's body. Results were not unexpected. Two had gone too far. Was this relationship recently developed, or had it been hidden for a long time? The police also had to investigate to clarify because it was very likely closely related to the case. The victim was Dang Eing-nok, 23 years old, a daughter-in-law of the Ma family for nearly 3 years. According to the statements collected from everyone, since moving to her husband's house, she had always been obedient, polite, and behaved properly towards her parents-in-law, never letting them complain or have any major conflict. Eing-nok's mother's family was a farmer, and the Ma family was also a farm. But the annual output was very large, and the income was 4 or 5 times that of an average family. In no time, this family became one of the richest people in the neighborhood. Therefore, Eing-nok knows her place very well. In addition to being a housewife, she also often helps her parents-in-law farming. Therefore, the neighbors also like her very much, praising the Ma family for marrying a very precious daughter-in-law. However, no one expected that this was just a cover to cover up the bad personality of Nok and her father-in-law. Her husband, Ma Tok-kao, 25 years old, is currently studying and working in Sichuan City. Since childhood, he has had outstanding academic achievements and plans not to follow the family's farming tradition in the future, but to seriously study business and develop something bigger. After graduating from university at the age of 22, he returned to his hometown and married Eing-nok, then returned to the city to continue studying and develop his unfinished career. He said that there are always more opportunities in the city than in the countryside, where one can only do manual labor. Tok-kao wants to change his life, so he is determined to find a job in a large company in Sichuan. Currently, he is working at that company with enough income for his father and wife at home to not have to work hard in the fields anymore. His mother passed away almost a year ago, so when he went to work, there were only 2 of them left. At first, he was afraid that the 2 of them would be afraid and uncomfortable, though he planned to quit his job and go back to his hometown to do something else. However, his father reassured him that there was nothing to worry about. The neighbors next door would help them, and he advised him to come home to visit often, because the work there was so important, could not be left unfinished. Only now did Tok-kao realize that everything was just an excuse for his father and wife to have a chance to be closer to each other. He felt like a money-making machine for the family. Surely, those 2 people wanted him to earn a lot of money so that they could live happily. Speaking of this, Tok-kao expressed his pain and disappointment. The exemplary father he always respected and the gentle wife he always loved had deceived him all this time. Mr. Ma Duat, 50 years old, is Tok-kao's father. Faced with clear evidence, he admitted that on the night of August 6, he and his daughter-in-law Eing-nok had sex. He did not notice her strange behavior because at that time his desire had clouded everything. Regarding her death, he affirmed that he did not know anything and certainly did not harm her. Regarding the relationship with the victim, Mr. Duat admitted that the 2 had started to go beyond the limit for nearly 3 months. At that time, his wife, Miss Lei, had passed away for nearly a year, and Eing-nok's husband worked far away, only coming home once a month. Mr. Duat stated that it was Eing-nok who took the initiative to flirt with him first. At first, Mr. Duat thought his daughter-in-law was joking, but later she dressed less and less modestly and intentionally touched him intimately. Although he knew it was immoral, he tried to refuse and threatened to tell her husband. However, Eing-nok did not change. One time, she deliberately entered his room at night, took off her clothes, and climbed into bed. What man could resist this attraction? Moreover, he had not had a woman for a long time. Although he knew he was wronging his son, from then on, could not control himself, and neither could Eing-nok. The frequency of their relationship increased and became more diverse. At first, it was in the private bedroom. Then they tried other places like the living room, in the field, to experience new feeling. Of course, before doing that, they observed very carefully to avoid being discovered. Through that statement, the police were half believing and half doubting. Maybe he lied that Ying-ok was the one who initiated the relationship to reduce the punishment and wanted to be considered as a reluctant person. To verify how accurate Mr. Duat's testimony is, more information from the neighbors is needed. First, the police took statements from the first people to discover the incident. Zhu Kao reported that at 4 p.m. on August 6th, he took a bus from his hometown to Sichuan City. However, when he arrived at 9 p.m., he discovered that he had brought the wrong house key. At first, he thought that he had brought both keys and had dropped his room key on the bus, though he went back to look for it, but still couldn't find it. Zhu Kao guessed that when he left, he had mistakenly taken 2 keys that were not much different. It was not until 1 o'clock in the morning that he caught the bus home. At nearly 6 a.m., he walked from the alley and met Uncle Tuan, his father's close friend, walking around. He remembered that before leaving, he had promised to bring him fruit, but forgot, so he invited him over to his house to get it. When he arrived, Zhu Kao used the key to open the door, and it immediately matched. But he found it strange that it was already past 6 a.m., and the house was still not open. Could it be that the two of them had gone somewhere? Entering the house, he saw no one. He went to the room to look for his wife, couldn't find her, and when he entered Mr. Duat's room, Zhu Kao witnessed 2 naked bodies entwined in a deep sleep. At this time, he lost control and screamed, causing Mr. Tuan to come in to see what had happened. After that, everything happened as the police already knew. The police felt that the incident of him taking the wrong key and returning home immediately discovered the incident was quite a coincidence. But they dismissed it because they thought they were too suspicious. Next was Mr. Tuan. At this time, he had the opportunity to speak out, which he knew about Mr. Duat and his family. Before that, because he was Mr. Duat's close friend, Mr. Tuan had helped him many times in life, so he ignored the bad rumors in the neighborhood. Actually, the story of Mr. Duat's relationship with his daughter-in-law had been passed around by word of mouth for a long time. Mr. Tuan couldn't remember when it started, but it was definitely more than 3 months ago. He thought they had started a relationship before, not like what Mr. Duat said. However, that rumor was only said behind his back, so it probably didn't reach Zhu Kao's ears because he rarely appeared at home. Another rumor was even worse. Mr. Tuan only heard it but didn't dare believe it, because if it was made up, he could be sued. Mrs. Li, Mr. Duat's wife, had passed away more than a year ago. At that time, her leg was injured, so she was weak and had difficulty moving. That day, she went to the riverbank near her house, but because it was slippery and rainy, she fell into the river and no one knew. By the time they discovered it, she had passed away. That day, both Mr. Duat and Ying-ok were working in the fields. At that time, Zhu Kao also came home to attend his mother's funeral, and everyone felt that this family was really pitiful. But that was when they didn't know about the wrongdoings of the father and son. Later, when they heard about it, the neighbors suspected that Mr. Duat and Ying-ok had harmed Miss Li so that both of them could be free in the house without fear of being discovered. Worse still, they suspected that Ms. Led knew some secret, so they wanted to eliminate her to cover up the clues. In fact, at first, the police also suspected that there was something fishy about Ms. Li's death that they had not yet found an answer to. Therefore, the police once again gave Mr. Duat a chance to declare the truth about Ms. Li's accident and Ying-ok's death. Currently, Mr. Duat is the prime suspect in her death, and all the evidence points to him. On August 8th, the police summoned Mr. Duat to the police station for questioning with the information they had collected. They asked him to honestly declare, otherwise, when the police themselves found evidence to incriminate him, he would be punished more severely. Too scared, Mr. Duat admitted that he and Ying-ok had been having an affair for more than a year, not just 3 months as he had lied before. His purpose was to prevent the police from suspecting the death of his wife, Mrs. Li. Mr. Duat thought he had hidden it well, but it turned out that many people in the village already knew about him and Ngok. In fact, no matter how well he hid it, or even if the two of them had nothing to do with each other, it was difficult to escape the eyes of the public. The rumors not only spread but were also embellished, turning the untrue into true. Regarding Mrs. Lay's death, Mr. Duat said that she died on a stormy night. That time, he and Ngok were both at home. Mrs. Lay wanted to go to the toilet. Normally, he or Ngok would go with her, because that place was about 10 meters from the house. That night, he went to Ngok's room and locked the door. It was raining heavily, so he didn't know if she went to look for them or called them to go with her. Mr. Duat only remembered that he and Ngok were engrossed in each other until morning. When he returned to his room, he could not find her. After searching everywhere, he discovered her body floating in the river. Although he tried to save her, it was too late. Mr. Duat affirmed that Mrs. Lee's death was due to her carelessness, falling into the river and drowning, and was not caused by him or Ngok. However, he still felt guilty because he felt partly responsible for her death. Regarding Ngok's death, he initially thought it was due to an allergy or excessive sex leading to death. However, after checking the condoms he used, he discovered that the type he used that day was different from the previous types. This made him suspect that someone had deliberately taken advantage of his sex with Ngok, kill her, and frame him. He firmly affirmed that Ngok was allergic to latex, and she herself had told him not to buy condoms containing latex. Therefore, they always used the safe type and never had any problems. If this happened frequently, he could not have not known about Ngok's allergy. Police investigated and confirmed that the condom seller also remembered Mr. Duat because he always emphasized not to buy the type containing latex. From there, they temporarily eliminated suspicions against Mr. Duat. This led to the hypothesis that someone had switched condoms to harm Ngok, and that person must have known about her allergy. Police's next suspect was the victim's husband, Thuk Kao. However, after investigating condom stores, no one recognized Thuk Kao. Moreover, if he had just discovered the relationship between his father and his wife on August 7th and had trusted them completely before, there would be no reason for him to harm them. The police also asked the neighbors if the rumor about Mr. Duat and Ngok might have reached Thuk Kao. Mr. Tuan, a close neighbor, said that Thuk Kao had heard about the rumor from him, but he quickly denied it, saying it was just a fabrication. However, the police still suspected that Thuk Kao might have had suspicions before and kept them to himself, even though he did not say anything. However, Mr. Tuan did not think Thuk Kao was so cruel as to kill his wife and frame his father. He also mentioned another person he suspected, although he had no concrete evidence. It was Tong Tien, a young man in the neighborhood who had been in a relationship with Ngok before she got married. On August 10th, the police divided into two groups. One group investigated Thuk Kao's whereabouts, and the other group interrogated Tong Tien to verify whether Thuk Kao had lied about taking the wrong key on August 6th. The police went to the bus station where Thuk Kao had traveled and confirmed that he had boarded the bus to Sichuan City at 4 p.m. that day and returned to his hometown at 1 a.m. the next morning. The question was whether Thuk Kao had left by accident or had done so on purpose to avoid suspicion. If Thuk Kao had not bought condoms in his hometown, he must have bought them in Sichuan. At exactly 9 a.m. on August 10th, the police set off for Sichuan and went to the boarding house where Thuk Kao was staying. At the same time, the police also investigated Tong Tien, Ngok's ex-lover. Tong Tien admitted that they had studied together and had been in love for nearly 2 years after graduating. However, because both of them had poor academic performance, they did not continue their studies at university and instead went to work. Their difficult lives caused their feelings to fade. Tong Tien had promised to marry Ngok when she had enough money, but she had met Thuk Kao, who had a better education and career than him. This made Tong Tien angry and disappointed. Ngok said that her family wanted her to marry Thuk Kao because he was capable of taking care of her future. Although she still had feelings for Tong Tien, she could not make up her mind and hoped that he would understand. Tong Tien felt betrayed. especially when he saw Yangok living a happy life, while he was still poor. Although disappointed, Tongtian affirmed that he had focused on work and removed Yangok from his life. He also said that when they were in love, Yangok was very chaste, so they never had sex. Though he certainly did not know that she was allergic to latex condoms. Tongtian also affirmed that there was no reason to harm Yangok. Meanwhile, at 13 on the same day, police went to the boarding house where Thup Kao lived in Tusuyen. They searched for condom shops near and far to ask if the sellers recognized Thup Kao. The result was that at a shop about 6 kilometers from Thup Kao's boarding house, the seller recognized him immediately, even though Thup Kao was wearing a mask. The seller remembered Thup Kao because of the scar on his eyebrow and affirmed that he had bought a large quantity of latex condoms about 2 weeks ago. There was no doubt about it. Culprit was Thup Kao. The police determined that he had a sophisticated plan to avoid being discovered and did not need to directly take action. On August 11th, the police summoned both the Ma family and their witnesses to the police station for confrontation. At this time, Mr. Duat admitted that he was the perpetrator and said that there was enough evidence, hoping that the police would close the case and convict him. However, the police did not believe him and thought that Mr. Duat had guessed that his son was the perpetrator. So he wanted to take the blame for his son because he felt guilty towards Thup Kao. Police pretended to agree and presented evidence concluding that Mr. Duat was the perpetrator to see Thup Kao's reaction. As expected, Thup Kao confessed that he was the perpetrator and agreed to tell the whole truth. He said that since marrying Yangok, the whole family had lived in harmony and happiness. However, after his mother died from drowning, Thup Kao began to hear bad rumors about the relationship between his father and Yangok. At first, he did not believe the rumors until early February this year. Thup Kao returned home and once again heard warnings from the neighbors about the illicit relationship between his father and his wife. At this time, he began to doubt the rumors more, and even thought about his mother's death, which might be related to his father and wife. However, when he returned home, he found everything was normal. His father and wife's attitudes were not strange. This made him reassure himself that he was too suspicious, listening to outsiders and thinking badly of his relatives. In June, Thup Kao decided to return to his hometown again. This time, he did not inform his family in advance, but secretly returned at night to verify his suspicions. That night, he lurked around the house to see if there was anything unusual. Indeed, he was very shocked when, at nearly 11 p.m., he heard lewd sounds coming from his own house. The people being intimate were none other than his biological father and wife. Too disappointed and miserable, Thup Kao took a bus back to the city, temporarily not wanting to face them. Thinking about the rumors, Thup Kao increasingly suspected that his mother's death was related to these two people, whether directly or indirectly. He believed that there is no smoke without fire, and if the rumors about the illicit relationship were true, then there was no reason why they were not related to his mother's death. Thinking of this, Thup Kao became more and more angry and resentful of his father and wife. He felt resentful for his mother, and indignant for himself when he struggled alone in a foreign land, worked hard to earn money to support his father and wife, but was betrayed by them. From then on, Thup Kao decided to come up with a very meticulous plan to expose the true faces of Mr. Duat and Yangok. He not only wanted to kill them to avenge his mother and himself, but also wanted their story to be exposed so that he would lose all his reputation and face. However, Thup Kao knew that if he killed them directly, he would definitely be investigated and discovered. He carefully thought about the characteristics or diseases that could affect their lives. Thup Kao recalled the first night of the couple. Because they planned to have children when they were stable, Thup Kao always used condoms during sex. One time, when he was in a state of excitement, Thup Kao discovered that Yangok felt uncomfortable. At first, he thought it was because it was the first time, but after a while, he saw his wife itching, especially the skin that came into contact with the condom. Her skin became red, rashes, and hives appeared. More alarmingly, Yangok began to feel uncomfortable in the genital area, a burning sensation. Thuk Kao realized that his wife was at risk, so he stopped immediately. The next morning, Thuk Kao took his wife to the doctor, and the doctor said it was a symptom of a latex allergy. The doctor told her to absolutely not use condoms containing latex anymore, and to switch to another type immediately. They also said that luckily, Thuk Kao stopped in time. If he continued, his life would definitely be in danger. Recalling this incident, Thuk Kao saw this as a good opportunity to indirectly kill his wife and frame his father. From then on, planned to visit home, with the main purpose of carrying out his actions. This time, Thuk Kao was home for nearly 2 weeks, much longer than usual. During that time, he was always at home, and if he went anywhere, he would bring 1 or 2 people along to separate his father and wife, not giving them time alone together. Even when sleeping, Thuk Kao held his wife tightly and was always alert, not sleeping too deeply to keep watch. At that time, Thuk Kao noticed the uncomfortable and frustrated attitudes of his wife and father. Once, he deliberately had sex with Yingok in a private room when Mr. Duat was at home. The more angry they were, the more Thuk Kao's plan went as expected. 2 weeks of not being intimate with each other made both Mr. Duat and Yingok uncomfortable. Thuk Kao guessed that as soon as he got to the city, they would find a way to have sex that same night, or at the latest 1 or 2 days later. On the morning of August 6, Thuk Kao sneaked into the room and searched everywhere for condoms. Luckily, he found them and replaced them with condoms he had bought from Sichuan City. To avoid suspicion later, Thuk Kao planned to take 2 trips and pretended to have the wrong house key. In fact, he deliberately brought the key with him so that he could return home the next morning without waking them up, and at the same time catch them red-handed to have more witnesses. On the way back, Thuk Kao dragged Mr. Tuan along, which made things easier. Although he heard his father's testimony about his mother's death, Thuk Kao still did not believe that he was telling the truth. He thought that his father might be lying to cover up his crime, because the case could not be overturned. Although he and Yingok did not directly harm his mother, Thuk Kao believed that they indirectly pushed his mother to death. A husband and a daughter-in-law, because of a momentary desire, abandoned an old and weak person. That was cruel. Therefore, in order to take revenge, Thuk Kao had no regrets. He believed that one person had to die, one person had to be exposed for all crimes and be slandered by society was the price they had to pay. No one demanded justice for his mother, though he would be the one to do it. Even if the future was buried forever, he was willing. Mr. Duet, now, was too remorseful and accepted this price. He asked the court to reduce Thuk Kao's sentence, because his son was young and had a bright career ahead of him. He took all the blame upon himself and asked to take the blame for his son because he was the one who used that condom, directly causing Yingok's death. He begged the court to give Thuk Kao a chance to start his life over. If he could not take the death penalty instead, he was willing to take a few more years in prison for his son. However, Thuk Kao refused that request. He said that when he decided to kill, he thought of the worst consequences he would have to bear. He asked the law to deal with the right person and the right crime. On August 15, 1990, the Sichuan People's Court, China sentenced the defendant Ma Shuqiu to 20 years in prison for indirect murder and Ma Duat to N years in prison for molestation. A happy family was now completely destroyed because of a momentary physical desire. This case is a testament to the difference between good and evil in each person. The father-in-law and daughter-in-law revealed their worldly desires, violating morality. The son revealed his cruel nature by plotting to kill and trying every way to cover up the crime. In the end, they had to suffer a tragic end for all the sins they had committed.
Thank you for joining us in today's video. If you have any other interesting cases you want us to explore, please share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to learn more about real cases around the world.